We've come to 9:15 in the morning, and you are tuned to WNTN, 1550 AM in Cambridge, Needham, and Boston. We're streaming at WNTN.com. It's Mondays with Meleti, and your host, Meleti Pouliopoulos. Here with you all morning, my next guest is Carol Kostakos Petranek. She's an active member of the Greek genealogy community and an assistant director of the Washington, D.C. Family Search Center. She served for 10 years as a volunteer at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and now works on projects to preserve at-risk and historic records in Greece. Her websites are Spartan Roots, and a resource for learning about family research in Sparta, a village history project at Agios Ioannis in Sparta, and Carol and her colleague Georgia Stryker-Kielman have completed a video series, Bite-Sized Greek Genealogy. And they've written a companion handbook, which is free of charge, and they make it available to the public. And we'll say our good morning right now. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Meleti. What a beautiful day in Washington, D.C. How about for you?
It's beautiful up here, too. I was wishing people a happy spring. I don't know what to make of it. It's awfully, it just feels different, doesn't it?
It sure does. Well, it's certainly a happy Thanksgiving to everyone who's listening and to their families as well.
Yes, thank you, Carol, for joining us this morning. So I'm so impressed with your work, and I was trying to remember how I became acquainted with you and with Georgia and with Gregory Kontos, because it's almost like the Trinity in Greek genealogy
Oh,
research. I really, really mean that. And we have our mentors and we have our resources, and we're all kind of doing the same sort of thing in different spaces, but you're doing something extra, and I want to bring that out today. Let's first talk about Spartan roots. Tell us first, when we say Spartan roots, is it just for Sparti or is it for the greater area?
well, it's Sparta itself, of course, but generally the area and the villages surrounding Sparti. I don't go really as far south into southern Mani, but if you think about a Greek map, Laconia is pretty large. It's the eastern side of Taygetos, um, and just about covers the whole southern area of the Peloponnese from Arcadia down. So it's really quite huge. But my grandparents, great grandparents, and great greats, as far as I can trace them, are all from villages around Sparta. Three of my grandparents were born in Ioannidis, which is why I started a village history project for that. But we can talk about that a little bit later. So generally, it is Sparta, and the vicinity around Sparta is my specialty. But due to the work that I've been doing in that area, I have access to records and information for almost all of Laconia. So when people contact me through my website, Spartan Roots, and they say I have family from Malau or some area in the south, I may not be super familiar with that area, but I can certainly let them know what resources are available for them.
That's wonderful. When I went to your website at spartanroots.wordpress.com, I saw your project, and then I saw some incredible things there, and I want to point them out slowly. But first, a picture of you from 2019, and you were in Greece and you were digitizing records. Tell us first. Tell the audience, if you would, when did you start in this? You had worked for the National Archives for over 10 years. When did you get interested in genealogy and research?
Well, actually, I've been interested in learning more about my family for many years. I don't want to say how many because then I'll date myself, but it's been a long time. It's been 30 years. And so back then, our resources for getting information from Greece were so limited. There was absolutely nothing online because there wasn't anything online for anybody back then.
Right.
But I couldn't just hop in a car and go to a local courthouse and ask to see maybe wills and probate records, like we did for my husband's family. There was no way to access records from Greece unless you physically went there. So my research back then really was focused on trying to get as many oral histories from my family as possible. Trying to do research in U.S. records so that I could identify the people from Greece who were not only my direct line ancestors, but also who married into my family, because it's family. When someone marries in, they're part of your family too.
Right.
So I spent that time with my parents, getting their oral histories, and I've since completed a book about them. I've also interviewed aunts and uncles. I wrote letters. I went and visited people, and I just tried to get as much information from people here in America as I could. And that was the backbone for the research that has now just completely taken off. I wrote some letters to the metropolises in Greece, and asked if they had a marriage record for such and such a great grandparent.
Right.
Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. I wrote to the archives in Sparta and asked if they had records for my Kostakos family from Ioannis, and I received in the mail these huge, oversized copies of ledger-sized copies of their demotologion or town registers, family registers. So it was very slow going back then, but that was how I started.
That's very interesting, to think of it be pre the internet. Now, so much we receive through Google searches and content-rich websites. But if you were working pre-internet, you really had to discover how to do research and know to write the letters and to do the follow-up and that sort of thing. So when you were in Greece and you were digitizing records and doing research there, what did you find now in terms of, I want to break it up to the church records and then the civil records. Let's just take,
Mm-hmm.
how far back would you say are there Greek records? What are the oldest, some of the oldest Greek records that you've seen?
Absolutely. So we have to remember that before 1830, there was no modern Greek state. We were under Ottoman rule, and there were no official Greek records before 1830. So we have to look from the period 1830 forward. The earliest records that we have found in Greece are election registers. We have to think and remember that when the Greek government was formed, the first thing that they needed to do was hold elections for their new democratic government. And the second thing they needed to do was form a military and collect taxes from people so that they could support their new government. Consequently, the first records that were created were mail registers, or mitrorenon, as they're known in Greek, and election registers, lists of men who were eligible to vote. In the earliest years, a man had to be 25 years old in order to be eligible to vote. That time frame dropped down to 21 years a few years later. But these earliest records from 1844 are online. They've been digitized by the General State Archives of Greece. However, you can find them on the Greek state website, but they're unindexed, and you have to sort through to try to find what records are available for your specific region in Greece.
Right, they're not
Now,
searchable, right?
yeah, now we have, thanks to GreekAncestry.net, my colleague Gregory Conto started that business officially in 2020.
Yes.
We have the 1844 election registers on GreekAncestry.net, and they're name indexed in both Greek and English. So you don't have to try to navigate a convoluted website. You can just go right to GreekAncestry.net, type in a name in either Greek or English, and if there's an 1844 election register for that person, you will see that name come up, and you'll have the option to purchase that record. We, at one point, when you're ready, we'll go ahead and talk about what Gregory has done. It's just been a phenomenal resource for people. But that is the earliest record first. The second is the male registers. And the male registers, as I mentioned previously, were lists of men who were born, and every municipality had to keep such a list for tax and military purposes. So it was only the men that were listed, not the women, and because they're the ones that fought in the Army and they're the ones that pay taxes. So consequently, there are some male registers as early as 1840, but they're very, very scant. In some of the villages I've seen, there may only be one or two men listed. So obviously it took a while for people to get in the groove and follow the rules. But if you get into 1850s, 1860s, and after, they're pretty complete records. The only issue with the male register is that the dates can be off by a couple of years, depending on when those records were created, when the men were actually registered. In other words, if a baby was born, we're not going to say that a farmer in a rural village in Greece at the top of the mountain is going to go down to the locality immediately to register his son's birth.
Oh, it's the same. It's the same thing here, actually, with the American records. My mother was born on a farm, and there was nothing at the city hall when they went in a year and a half later and said, "Oh, by the way, I had a child on the farm." That's the way they did it. But I'm interested. So I understand the civil record. I understand what you're saying, that that once the Greek government was formed, and then there was they were doing record taking. But what about the church records? Have you had access to those? Because those should go further back. The church kept records for, didn't they?
Oh, Meleti, you have just asked a question that has pierced my heart. The church was the official record keeper in the whole country of Greece until about in the early 1920s, about 1923. There was a law passed requiring civil registration for birth, marriages, and deaths. Prior to that, it was strictly the records of the church, because the Orthodox Church is the state church of Greece. So they were the official record keepers. I had the opportunity in 2019 at the request of Bishop Evstathios at the metropolis of Sparta. He asked all of the priests under his jurisdiction, so that would be almost all of Laconia, except a couple of pockets in Mani, to bring their village church books to the metropolis for me to digitize them. And I did that. I spent weeks there in the summer digitizing every birth, marriage, and death book in 140 villages in Laconia. And let me tell you, out of 140 villages, there were only about 8 that had even one book before 1900.
Yeah.
Those we have lost our history of our people, the everyday, ordinary people. We have lost their history in Laconia. Some areas of Greece may have church records going back farther than that, but in the area that I specialize in, some priests brought me books that started in 1950. And I said to them, "Where are the old books?" And they would shrug and say, "We don't have them. We don't know where they are. This is all I have." So we
have the same problem actually here. A lot of our church records are missing, and it's a very serious problem. But in here in America, when the archdiocese formed, those kinds of records, those registry records of the sacraments, say the births and the marriages and such, there were triplicates that were made, or there were copies that were made that were sent to the archdiocese. Have you found a higher authority than say the local priest, a village priest? Have you found the equivalent of an archdiocese? I'm not sure what the hierarchy is in Greece, but I'm curious if records were copied and sent to a central place in the old days.
Yes, not necessarily the births and deaths, but the marriages were sent to the metropolises. So all of the metropolises in Greece have marriage records that the priests happened, if they did what they were supposed to do and send a copy to the bishop, they would have those records. Now, marriages in Greece are a very interesting process. If you have a man and a woman and they were from the same village, the village priest knew both of them. He knew their families, and he could attest that they were not related within 6 dots of marriage. And
That was
uh,
important because we had a problem of cousins marrying cousins here, and the church
yes,
actually had to come out with an official the church in America came out with an official document and said, "No, you really can't marry your nuna, or you can't marry." And it was just to me, it sounded like, wow, we have to say that, but
yes,
I guess
they
it was
had
a
to say
thing.
that.
Yeah.
And I actually have a copy. It's fascinating. In fact, I've done a Spartan Roots post on it called 6 Dots to Marriage, where one of the village priests actually drew dots for the bride and for the groom, pointing up on a triangular diagram to their common ancestor to prove that they were not close enough where they could not be married. In other words, they could be married because they had the number of generations removed from the common ancestor. So that was fascinating. So here we go. So at the metropolis,
Hmm.
the process is that the village priest would write a letter to the bishop and say, I know John Pappas and Mary Poulos, and they are both from my village. I can attest that they're not related, and their parents give their approval to the marriage. And the bishop would write back and approve that marriage. So you have documentation there. You have a letter from the priest, and you have a return letter from the bishop. And so that documentation stayed actually at the metropolis. And then when the village priest got the permission from the bishop to perform the marriage was usually performed within a day or so after that request was granted. So we have now at the metropolis registers of marriage. We have index books that the priest would say, oh, here's Ioannis Pappas and Maria Poulos, and their license was issued on such and such a day. So one of the clerks kept records in the books of who the bride and the groom were and when the marriage license was issued, and had copies of that documentation. What I understood during the summers I worked at the metropolis was that there was an effort to try to also get the priests to send records of births and deaths as well as the marriages, but that never really came to be. So the metropolises do have the marriage records. Some may have some birth and death records from villages, but it's not a given.
Are they resourced then to take inquiry, or there are we able to access those records?
You can write to the metropolis and request a lookup for a particular marriage. However, you need to know a couple of things that are really critical. First, you need to know the year or the approximate year of the marriage. And if you do not know that marriage year, let's say it's for your great grandparents, if you have their families, if you've documented their families, what they will do is they will look back 1 year prior to the birth of the oldest child, and they'll start looking in their registers then. You have to remember that these are not alphabetical, nor are they by village.
Right.
As those, as that metropolis received these requests for marriages from all over Laconia,
Hmm.
from many villages, they did them chronologically. So that means somebody has to go through those books and start reading entry by entry to try to find your specific entry. So you really need to have an approximate date within a year or two, the exact names of the bride and the groom and their villages of origin. And the villages are critical because there are a lot of names that are found in more than one village.
Right.
So if you don't know the village and the clerk finds Ioannis Papis and Maria Poulos from Levetsova, but your people were from Mistras and you don't know which village they're from, the clerk doesn't know which record is yours. So you
It's a very complicated thing because a lot of people here, the early immigrants, remember the village names as they were back during the Ottoman Empire. And now
yes.
we've gotten away from those names and we've gone back to the original Greek names. But meanwhile, people who don't know this will say, well, gee, my relative was from Caparelli, and it's Mathirea now, and a lot of people don't realize that there was that thing going on. But I wanted to say, so you're saying that they will take inquiries, which is really wonderful, because I know it is a lot of work, and you're suggesting that you really have to have this information before you go to them. It's nice that they are providing those records, that you can write to them. From working with the Greek civil documents and with the church documents, were you amazed at all the information that they were doing? Their record keeping, it seems to me, was very good. They tracked a lot of things.
Yes. The male registers track the year of birth of the male's name, his village, and his father's name usually. Usually. Sometimes the father's name is missing, but the beauty of a male register for a civil record is that you can go back one more generation to know the name of the father. For the marriage records list the name of the groom, oftentimes his father's name, most times, but not always. For the bride, always lists her father's name. So, and their villages. So you can, again, go back one generation in finding the people who are of interest to you in those records.
And for
we
those,
also,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. For civil records, we also have the Dimotoloi and Kinitotos, sorry, I didn't pronounce that correctly, or the town registers. And these are similar to U.S. Census records.
Right.
Most of them were created in the mid-1950s. And if you stop and think about that era in Greece's history, it was right after World War II. It was after the horrible Civil War. And it appears that the municipalities were trying to get registers of who was actually living in their areas. So we have the father of the head of household, his name, where he was born, when he was born, what his occupation was, if he's listed in the male register. We have the wife, his wife with the same information, his children with the same information. So these town registers are really excellent resources, especially for those just trying to identify their families in their villages. And they're accessible through the General State Archives of Greece local offices. There are local offices throughout Greece in some of the larger areas, municipalities such as Sparta, Arcadia, Kalamata, Patra. I'm just focused on the Peloponnese right now. So you can write to them and ask if there is a town register. And if there is, they will send it to you.
If you're just tuning in, our guest this morning is Carol Kostakos Petranek. She is a very active member of the Greek genealogy community and assistant director at the Washington, D.C. Family Search Center. She has a wonderful website. I encourage you to go there, spartanroots.wordpress.com. And it's a resource for learning about family history research in Sparta and a village history project on Aios Ioannis, which we're going to ask her about in just a minute. And she and her colleague Georgia Stryker Kielman have compiled an excellent video series, Bite-Sized Greek Genealogy. Let's start there. Tell us how that got going. You've done. It's one thing to provide links to services. I think a lot of people are inundated with all of the information they have, But you're also teaching them some critical thinking, some deductive reasoning. You were talking about orphans and how you can detect that in the records, and so it's nice that you're showing people how you interpret the records. which it's a wonderful, wonderful thing you're doing. How did that get started, Bite-Sized Greek Genealogy?
Sure. Thank you for asking about that. We're really pleased with how this has turned out. Okay, so Hellenic Genealogy Geek, Geek, not Greek, but geek, like a computer geek.
Yeah, right.
Georgia started that Facebook page. Oh my gosh, maybe 12 years ago, and it now has over 45,000 people on it from all over the world. That's a phenomenal number of people that join a Facebook group. And this group is very, 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 very active. When I say very active, I mean somebody will post a query about how do I find my ancestor in Patras. And you may have 20 or 30 comments of people jumping right on in and giving advice.
Yes, and
So,
how to translate
uh-huh,
documents, how to find things. It's a wonderful thing.
yeah.
But you mentioned a Facebook book group that I'm familiar with. Not a lot of our listeners, well, many of our listeners are not on Facebook for various reasons. There's also a
Mhm.
website as well. Does the forum and the participation carry over to the website?
It does not. The website, HellenicGenealogyGeek.com, is Georgia's website, and it is a resource for people who are looking to try to understand what type of Greek records are available in Greece, as well as books, articles, videos, anything that has to do with any area of Greek research. She collects that information and she catalogs it and provides links on her Hellenic Genealogy Geek website. So, unfortunately, the conversation does not go there. That's a static website. The conversation takes place on the Facebook page. But to go back to answer your initial question,
Yes.
we found that we were repeating answers to some of the most basic questions over and over again because there were some months that we had 400 people join the group. The interest in Greeks from all over the world learning about their families and how to trace their families has just exploded within the last 5 or 6 years. We just have new people joining every day, and they keep asking the same questions. And so Georgia and we talk several times a week. And one day I just said, you know what? Why don't we do a video series of the basics so that when people ask these questions, instead of one of us sitting there typing the same answer over and over, we could just say, hey, we have this 10-minute video that will explain exactly what it is you're looking for, and here's the link. So we did that. We started that in the springtime this past year, and we thought, we've been doing this for years. We can knock this out. This is an easy thing to do. Oh my gosh, it's one thing to have institutional knowledge in your head. It's another thing to be able to impart that information in an easy, concise way with visuals that people can comprehend and understand who know nothing about the topic. So
Yes.
we put a ton of work into
Oh,
that.
it shows. It really shows, Carol. And I think that I have a tongue-in-cheek thing that goes on with a good friend of mine here. We talk about doing a 50 over 50 award, 50 people over 50 years old that are doing wonderful things. And in this world of, historic records conservation, you and Gregory and definitely Georgia, the three of you would be right up in that list. I like the fact that you have this video service, again, the video series, that you're not just giving people links, but you're giving them context. You're explaining how
Mhm.
records are handled. You're explaining, in some cases, tradition. I found myself
Absolutely.
I learned about burial traditions there, that would refresh my
Mhm.
mind, the bone room and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
it's fascinating, and you're doing such good work. What is the best way for people to reach you?
To reach me, well, there's a couple of different ways. I would encourage them also not only to reach me, but to also to reach out to Georgia and Gregory. The three of us are work together and try to help and support each other in this initiative. So if someone wants to contact me, they can do so by email at spartanroots1, the number one, at gmail.com. And they can contact Gregory through GreekAncestry.net. And they can contact Georgia through HellenicGenealogyGeek.com.
And we've put up here on Facebook. We've put up some links for people that are there, or if you're just hearing this, if you didn't see it on Facebook, you're not looking, because there is a flyer there. There are posts that are being circulated. Do share them and let people know that there is this good work that's going on, and participate in it to the extent that you can. One of the things I like about the forum that Georgia has is that people are scanning documents that may be handwritten and they don't understand, they don't read Greek, and they can't interpret it, and people jump right in. And that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And they jump right in within a minute. I mean, it's not like you have to wait 2 days for somebody to get back to you. The forum is extremely reactive and immediate. So you put up a post, and somebody will get back to you. Like by the time you finish hitting the enter key and go get a cup of coffee and come back, you've got maybe 8 or 10 people that have replied to your quest. The other thing that we find very interesting is many of the people that are joining the group are younger people who are part Greek. Maybe when I say part Greek, I don't mean a parent. I mean a grandparent, or even for the younger people, they may have one great-grandparent who's Greek. And they're like, I'd love to know more about this part of my history.
Right. That's great.
That's fascinating, and we're so excited about that.
That's really important that we connect with the youth, because especially the ones that are Greek, because they're going to be the caretakers of these documents, of this history. And for those of you that have been listening to this program over the years, we've brought in a number of speakers, yourself now included, that has been working in the field, that see how important this is. It's something that we have to do. We just have to do. And wouldn't it be a great thing if we could put out a national call, if we had that kind of leadership that would call out to the national organizations and to the church and to the cultural organizations that are around, that it's not just an exercise to get through for your gala, to put together a PowerPoint slide, but there's something very serious that we need to do underneath all of that, and that the young people and the next generations need those connections. And
well, they especially need them when the immigrant ancestor has passed, and that's what's happening. If we stop and think that the greatest immigration took place in the early 1900s, those people are gone. Maybe older people can remember their immigrant grandparents, but older people's children and their grandchildren have no clue. They've never met these people. They have no connection to the homeland. And now there's a great interest in people to understand their roots. They're taking DNA tests. We find a lot of people come on the Facebook page and say, I took a DNA test and I'm 25% Greek and I had no clue. What's it like to be Greek, and how can I learn about my family? So it's very important, very important.
So great.
And all we can do is each person maybe can't do what I do or what Georgia does, but every person can document their own family history, their traditions, and what they know about their ancestors going back.
And I think we should also mention that for those people who don't have, they're not able to read Greek, and they just can't hop on a plane and go to Greece, to do the research, because it's quite a journey over there. Sometimes you have to go through several offices and such, and but there are people who offer a search service, and Gregory is one of them, and that's very helpful, because you have people in the country that know how to search the records, and also know what to do if there's a record that's missing. and you're looking for,
Absolutely.
right, isn't that the special thing, right? You're looking for a piece of information. It could exist across three or four different records.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
that's I want to ask you about your history project with Ayos Ioannis, and
Yes,
which side of the family came from there?
both.
Really?
my mother's my mother's three of my four grandparents are from this village. Were born in this village. So consequently, have a connection to every family in the village. If it's not through marriage, it's through being a nuna or a nuno or a next door neighbor or somebody they went to church with. So I have decided to do what's called a village history project. This initiative is under GreekAncestry.net, Gregory's site, and we felt that people who were interested in documenting the histories and the families of their villages can be part of this overall project. We have probably about 40 village history projects right now that are going on all over Greece. And what it is it's not that you're just trying to document your specific family, but that you have a commitment to document all the families that lived in that village for a specific time frame. For me, it's as far back as the records go, up to about 1950. And there are several record collections that I use. I have extracted names, created spreadsheets, put those names and all the families in a database. And I started the website Iosioani Sparta to capture those histories. We also request that if people have photos of their grandparents and other relatives, we put them up on the site to memorialize those families. And I'm now working with one of my cousins whose grandfather wrote a brief history of the village. We've gotten that translated, and we'll be putting that up on the website as well. So basically, what I'm trying to do is document the families and the history of the village so that anyone who has ties to that village can go to this website and can learn about their ancestral home. There's also a companion Facebook page. People sometimes make comments, may upload a picture there, may ask a question. So we try to keep the conversation going there as well.
I'm curious, was there a Laconian society here in America, a Pan-Laconian or Laconian society in Washington? I know we had them up here. I believe they were
Yes,
national.
there is. Yes, they are, and there is one in Washington. Yes.
And so, is there still one today? What was it? What
Yes.
is really? Okay, yeah. Tell us
Uh-huh.
because you're from Washington D.C., they're our nation's capital. Do you have active cultural organizations there?
Yes, the Laconian Society is quite active here, and unfortunately I don't participate in that group as much as I would like to, but they're extremely active, and they meet regularly here in DC.
Nice, nice. And any other associations that you may know off the top of your head for people from other regions
Oh,
of Greece?
aside from Ahepa and Goya and the Daughters of Penelope that I was
Oh,
in when I was younger,
yeah.
the Greek churches here are very active in the communities, and people support them. Not just the Greeks, but the people in the area in general support them through their twice a year festivals, which are very much anticipated by the community. So the Greek church here is extremely active.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's very good to hear, Carol. And the great in the greater area, we have a common friend in Nicholas Previs, who is
Oh, yes.
Nick had done wonderful work early on. I think we were looking at it back in the '80s, again before computers, and his methodologies, his attention to detail, and it is just all we've all learned from that. And he's a good resource. He's doing a lot for that community. I just got something through the mail from the for that he put on for the AHEPA Worthington chapter had put on for Veterans Day to commemorate the Greek American veterans. And I always thought that would be a good thing for AHEPA National to take on as part of their history objective. And if there's anyone listening, that would be good to establish.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nick's a dear. And as you said earlier, there are people doing good things
Yes.
all over this country and all over the world. And it would be wonderful for we try to connect so that we can support each other and we can be resources for other people to learn more about a specific area of Greek culture, which would be you, or genealogy, which is us, or local history. So there are so many good people doing good things. And thank you so much for all that you do to preserve the history of our people here in America, for
Thank
your
you.
radio show, for your Facebook, for attempting with all that one human being can possibly do by himself,
Yeah.
without the benefit of a major organization to preserve our history. It's just critically important.
Thank you. Yeah, we're all doing good things, and I sometimes I get on my little soapbox, and people think, oh, this guy's a bummer. But if you're talking about climate change, you just can't have whipped cream and ice, ice cream and whipped cream. It's a serious issue when your newspapers are disappearing. But
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of work that we still have to do. Some of that work needs to be funded. It needs to be supported. And the leadership in the Greek American community needs to come forward. And Carol, I'm going to put it out there because I know you have a lot of followers as well. And the challenges out there, we're looking for a spokesperson for Greek American heritage, someone who can speak for conservation. Because we can sit and do our thing, but someone needs to get up there that's going to help to steer the ship, to lead the I want the mucky mucks to lead the people that need to be led, and to do more leading in this area. It's a real critical that we latch onto this. There's such an
Absolutely.
right. You see it where you are. I've talked to students across the country that have said to me, it's not just about ancient Greece, and we're missing the mark. And so we've got to correct that. Well, Carol,
Absolutely.
don't you
Thank
think?
you.
Thank you, Carol.
Absolutely. Stop and look at what all of the Greek people just in America. We're not even talking Canada, Australia, or other areas. All the good that they've done, all the contributions that they've made to this country. And I have a couple of books on my bookshelf. I have Kontopoulos' book and
Yes.
some others, but that work needs to be those accomplishments need to be documented moving forward, and I don't see that happening. So
It's not
I'm
happening.
as concerned as you.
Yeah, we haven't written our history as Greek Americans. Very few people can stand and say why they're proud to be Greek Americans. And we losing the artifacts. So if they wake
Hmm.
up in another 30 years, if they're still around, they're going to realize that, like you said, that the people have passed away, memories have gone, and the artifacts have been tossed. And
Yes,
so not everyone has to be into it, but someone has to be a spokesperson for it. So this is a national call, and I've not found it in 20 years. I found people to speak up for the church. I found people to speak up for their organizations, but not to this extent, to say that we really have to. Even the Greek government, I've approached government officials and said, this is important. Thank you for
hmm.
adding your voice, Carol, to this
Thank
call.
you, Meleti, and I wish you a wonderful holiday season and a blessed Thanksgiving to you and yours.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for inviting me to be on this show.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the diatribe. It just sort of happens when I find someone who understands so well. Thank you,
Thank
Carol.
you. Take care.
You too. Our guest
Bye
this
bye.
Bye bye. Our guest this morning was Carol Kostakos Petranek. She's an active member of the Greek genealogy community and an assistant director of the Washington, D.C. Family Search Center. She's doing incredible work. I encourage you to check it out, to get involved and participate. Every family, it seems, has a historian, and find out who that is in your family. If it's not you, there's got to be someone out there that likes the old pictures, that likes to do this sort of thing. Let's write our history. Let's not lose it. It's Mondays with Meleti and your host, Meleti Pouliopoulos. Stay tuned for the news report with Nicoletta coming up at the top of the hour.